Welcome back to the Indie Magazine Podcast. This week we're talking about The Bloody Hundredth, a new documentary on Apple TV Plus as part of their Masters of the Air series.
Stick around afterwards as we catch up on Shōgun Episode 6.
Welcome back to the Indie Magazine Podcast. We're here with our final Masters of the Air debrief series, talking about the documentary now on Apple TV Plus called The Bloody Hundredth. Good documentary, nice and sweet, short and sweet. What is it, just about an hour?
Yeah.
But I think it was a good watch. Anything stick out to you from the jump of what you liked, what you didn't like?
I was wondering where they got the recording footage from. Were they cannibalizing like an older documentary to make this one? Because a lot of that footage is old.
It was old. And I know Rosenthal passed away in 2007, so it was old footage.
Yeah.
I wish we had a little more from the production as far as notes. I don't know that we will have a lot of that information, but
yeah,
agree with you.
Yeah, no, I it was good. I think it's good to. I was wondering, like, I wonder if watching this before the series would have like helped me grasp or understand what was going on in the story a little bit better, like contextually, like in terms of the sequence of all events, having it from like a 10,000-foot view versus having it at the end. And either way, I think it's good, but I think having it at the end certainly gave me a little bit more of like a refresher of like, oh, this is the story that happened. And this isn't just a fictional story. Like, this was real. And like whets my appetite to go in and like maybe even watch it again now that I know what the story is.
Yeah, I think I might give it a rewatch too, because to your point, there's some points in the series where you're trying to just track the plot. And it's a little, not just out of order, but telling enough stories that's not extremely clear. To answer your question before that, though, I did look it up real quick. The directors, Mark Herzog and Laurent Bouzereau? Okay, American English. Anyways, they talked about how, they took footage from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and then put little splices of veterans who are still alive. So John Lucky Luckadoo and Bob Wolf, who are both 102 years old. So we have a little bit of them, but it was mostly archival footage or things used elsewhere. I'm in agreement with you. If they'd shown it at the beginning, it would have been easier to watch the series. And I also wonder what it's for. Like, we don't have the interviews at the beginning of every episode like Band of Brothers. So maybe that's part of it and people are just wanting to see the real thing. But yeah, this should have been a featurette before the premiere, not at the tail end.
Yeah, to whet our appetites, to just get us excited, because I think the advantage of the like Band of Brothers has over Masters of the Air is that the story of the invasion of Europe is so ubiquitously known. Like everyone just understands intuitively what that story was, but because our exposure to the Air Force versus the Luftwaffe is not as well known, I think that maybe doing this ahead of time and kind of tilling the soil ahead of time might have been a better strategy. But who am I? I'm not Tom Hanks. I'm not Steven Spielberg. I'm not a master of this.
Yeah, funny watching it and Tom Hanks narrating. I'm like, oh, he should narrate every documentary, first off.
Absolutely.
But second off, I think for those of us not steeped in wartime footage, it would have helped to see wartime footage of the bombers, fighters, flak before watching the show, because it makes it feel more real. Whereas afterwards, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we saw it with the CGI, we saw it with the special effects. But it would have been nice to see beforehand of, let's take a camera through a real B-17. Let's have an old pilot talk about how cold it got. All these things that we saw in the show that would have been a little nice beforehand to tease, where now it's just more of reaffirmation. So if you already liked the series and you finished it, you'll love watching the documentary. It's an hour long. It's quick.
Yeah.
But I think for those who are a little slow to get into it or not understanding everything, it would have been nicer beforehand.
And that's me. You just described me. I'm slower in understanding things.
or just not inundated with wartime historical docs, whatever.
Yeah. So I really, I love Tom Hanks and I love Steven Spielberg, and I think their work in these series is just phenomenal. Is there anyone you would have wished that they had interviewed?
Knowing they pulled all this footage together, I wish we would have had more Harry Crosby or Egan or Clevin. There has to be footage somewhere, right?
Yeah. I think there was some footage of Crosby in there, but the Bucky and Buck, like I'm not sure if I remember seeing footage of them in that documentary or having it called out specifically like, hey, here's your two main protagonists.
Yeah, and I know they both stayed in the military a little longer, so maybe I'm not sure. But either way, it would have been nice to see a little bit more. I, for one, although I loved at the end of episode 9, the side by side of the photos of the real person and the actor, do that for the whole cast and crew. Like, show it really quickly as you're talking. Because I liked some of the notes and some of the quotes of Rosenthal talks at the very beginning about him having the same reaction when he sees a B-17 today or when he was interviewed as when he first saw it, of it being like a beautiful sculpture when you got in formation with over 1,000 aircraft. It was something beautiful and dramatic. But I don't know if the visuals were always there to accompany what they were saying.
Yeah.
And also there was so much information. I feel like an hour was short. Like,
yeah.
If I were to do it, if I was in charge of Apple TV Plus, I would have split this into 9 20 to 25-minute documentary segments and released it with the episodes every week.
Honestly, yeah, that would have been so cool. I know that it's probably like maybe a smidge more production money, but it's probably just time, because a lot of this stuff, a lot of the footage already exists.
Yeah.
And so you're just paying Tom Hanks to like narrate over it, and like everyone's going to love that. No one's going to be sad about having like short 20-minute documentaries at the end of each episode. No one's going to be sad about that.
No. And to your point, you're just selling the people already sold on it, right? Like, if someone's watching the show, they're going to want to watch it. And if they don't, they're still going to watch the next episode. Who cares? I liked a little bit of Spielberg in there, him in the very beginning, talking about how patriotism was something of his father's generation, the greatest generation, how seriously they took it and how it changed over the generations. And so this is a love letter to that patriotism when it was a lot clearer. I also loved them showing a little bit about famous Americans who served in World War II. Some I didn't know, some I did know, but any surprises there for you?
Oh boy, what's that guy's name who's doing the narration?
Jimmy Stewart?
Jimmy Stewart.
Wonderful Life.
I was like, oh my gosh, I wish that I could, like, I do the transatlantic American accent. Like, I just wish that I had that because it sounds so cool.
Yeah, I used to try and do my own version of him. It's not very good, but I did years ago try to nail it when my voice was a little higher. It was fun to do because it's just so wild to our current ears.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Now, I had known he was in the Air Force. I didn't know for how long, but because he comes back and does It's a Wonderful Life, it blows my mind once again that he was big, but not that big, and he got bigger later. Anyway, I did get a little list. Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life was 1946, so that's after the war. Was not a movie loved at that time, but now it's beloved. Anyways, I have a list of other famous Americans who served in World War II, so I'm gonna rattle them off.
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart, U.S. Air Force. Paul Newman in the Navy. He was a substitute torpedo bomber pilot.
Wow.
Talk about a role I didn't know existed, a substitute torpedo bomber. Alec Guinness, the original Obi-Wan, was a landing craft naval soldier as part of the British forces, and he invaded Sicily, transported guns and ammo across the Mediterranean, so he was all over there. Kirk Douglas in the Navy, volunteered for the Navy after his vision stopped him from joining the Air Force. So Kirk Douglas could have been in the 100th. He was in one of the earlier groups of volunteers. Bad eyesight. Clark Gable was in the Air Force, and his wife, which this is a crazy fact, Clark Gable's wife was the first American female battle victim.
Wow.
Either way, he was posted in England. He completed 5 combat missions as an observer gunner. So this would have been the guy on the, not the ball turret, but like the back of the plane, I want to say. Anyways, he was 43 years old. So crazy. And here's the crazy fun fact with him. Hitler was such a huge fan of Clark Gable, absolutely loved him, that he put a huge prize reward money for any of his soldiers. He said anyone who can capture Gable alive and bring him to Berlin would get this massive reward.
What?
I think even if we have a fictionalized version, this is a Tarantino movie, right? This is like Django meets Inglourious Bastards. Hitler puts a bounty on this prized actor's head, and he's like, whoever brings him to me alive, huge reward money. So you have the SS, you have the Luftwaffe, you have all these fighting forces being like, we need to take down Gable and bring him in alive.
And then of course the plot twist would be this insane fixation is the thing that ultimately undoes the Axis powers because they're infighting so much that it gives the Allies the advantage.
I want to have Hitler broken, sweaty, bleeding, being like, if only I had Gable. Like, forget Goebbels, he wants Gable. It's just
Or if it was just a typo, actually, that was
Or a time that would be really funny. At
be
all
really
costs, protect Goebbels. No, Gable.
yeah.
Yeah. Last two that have a little tie-in. Hank Greenberg was a baseball player that once Pearl Harbor was attacked, he set his career aside and went to join the war. Kind of crazy. Like today, we talk about Pat Tillman from the Cardinals and stuff. He was one of the first to do it and pause Major League Sports. And the last one, not an American or a Brit, but Audrey Hepburn was living in occupied Holland, and she aided the Dutch resistance. She did covert live shows to generate money for the resistance and buy more ammo. She transported information and goods at these secret shows to get things traded. She deceived Nazi spies, all kinds of things. And I'm like, Audrey Hepburn?
How have we not had a biopic of Audrey Hepburn yet?
Yeah, and it's tough because she was such a huge star. I know that the family of the estate must be touchy on it. But again, I'm a fan of if you can't get the real thing, twist it a little bit, make it fictionalized, add some things and say, oh,
yeah,
inspired by. We're done.
Inspired, yeah. Because that's a story. That's a great story. And everyone loves Audrey Hepburn. She's a darling.
They had a chance in the show. I'm like, wait, we saw the Dutch resistance in Holland with our American boys. We didn't even mention Audrey Hepburn? No, nothing?
Yeah.
Now, it does remind me of Tarantino putting the German actress in the bar scene, right?
Yeah.
Who Michael Fassbender goes to meet and everything else. Yeah. And that's related, but it's not exactly. Anyway, we need Audrey Hepburn. We need a Clark Gable wartime movie.
Let's get the World War II cinematic universe going. There's just so many.
That's called the History Channel of the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
We'll revamp it, restart. We'll do a fresh start.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool.
The B-17, we saw more of it. We saw some more stuff. We talked about the Norton bomb site already. We got some more information there. Dropping a bomb from 20,000 feet into a pickle barrel.
That's insane, right? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's got to be propaganda. That's not... Is that real?
When we talked to Fred Bell at the Palm Springs Air Museum, he said that's accurate. You could get it down to that level, which us knowing all of the technological advances and when they're actually talked about and released versus when they first come out makes sense. But I will say, a pickle barrel, I don't know.
The series shows them go to great lengths to make sure that when their planes are going down, that they destroy their site.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't fall into enemy hands. And maybe there's truth to the insanity that they just had tremendously accurate bomb drops if they were bombing during the day.
Yeah. Fred Bell at Palm Springs had said this was as secret as the Manhattan Project, the Norton bomb sites, which I think they mentioned in the show too.
Yeah.
As secret as the Manhattan projects. And then he also mentioned that the most expensive project of any war we've had is the B-29 Superfortress bomber project, which I also didn't know that because I'm thinking like, oh, B-17s, World War II, or the B-24. But the B-29, which is just the massive ones they go to drop all the bombs in Japan and everywhere else, that apparently was more expensive than the Manhattan Project or anything else we were doing. So maybe it's it's the boring. The boring tech that doesn't get all the Oppenheimer movies.
Yeah, the Oppenheimer movies the Oppenheimer tech threatens to destroy the world.
Yeah, the B-29's less.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool. The one last thing I really liked was them pointing out more about the German camps, the Stalag Luft.
Yeah.
And just the fact that there were German spies in America finding out all these guys' names, where they were from, all the sports stuff, because we saw in the show.
Yeah.
But them pointing out that it wasn't just like over the wire or buying newspapers in London. It was spies teleporting this all back, which is crazy because I don't think, at least in my mind, I attach so much spy strategery to World War II as opposed to like the Cold War.
Yeah.
And I think they have a lot of interesting info of date of birth, your parents, how are they doing, all these things that German spies would pass on.
Yeah, that's creepy. That's scary.
Yeah.
It's probably still happening today. I'm willingly giving my data away every time I use my phone. Maybe it's happening on a different level.
Yeah, call it TikTok, call it Meta. Someone's taking our data. They know.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good documentary. I enjoyed watching it. I think I would have enjoyed watching it ahead of time as it is. I think it's a really good summation of the series, especially for those of us who didn't have some of the historical context that people who are more savvy with history probably already had. And honestly, it whets my palate and I want to go back and watch it again. Like binge it this time instead of like string it out week to week.
When are you going to start the Pacific?
I don't know. I've heard enough that it's heavy and
it's dark and heavy. Yeah, it is. It was not as easy to watch all the way through. So yeah, maybe watch Masters of the Air one more time all the way through.
Get
And
some
then
of
this
that
summer,
American heroism.
there you go. This summer we'll watch Band of Brothers and we'll go through
Yeah.
that series. And then we'll do the Pacific by fall.
Okay.
So you
No,
can
that
end
sounds
the
that's a good
Pacific and
timeline.
go into the holidays. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can watch the darkest of the three while we're getting back
Yes.
into winter in the darkest of times.
Wonderful.
There's symbolism there, yeah.
There is some symbolism.
Yeah.
We hope everyone enjoyed the documentary who watched. And if you haven't yet, give it a watch before or after you watch Masters of the Air. And Masters of the Air is now streaming, all 9 episodes plus the doc on Apple TV Plus. All right, let's talk about Shōgun episode 6, titled Ladies of the Willow World. Do you want to go to the Willow World?
Oh, yeah, dude. Of course I want to go to the Willow World. This episode also could be titled Hell Hath No Fury Like a Woman Scorned.
It's just wonderful.
Yeah, I think this episode kind of builds on the idea of the Eightfold Fence, where the women, I think, are the ones who really live behind the Eightfold Fence much more complexly than the men in Japan, at least as depicted in the show. And you can tell that there's certainly some scheming behind the scenes. And it, as of this episode, looks like the women are the ones, maybe not steering the show, but they certainly have a handle on things.
Yeah, honestly, it reminded me a little of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The man is the head, but the woman is the neck that turns the head. I think last episode we saw a little bit about Mariko and her father, and then of course he dies, and so there's all these different like aspects that are all shrouded in mystery. I loved though that this time it gave us two perspectives at once: Mariko and Lady Ochiba at the same time, and how they interweave without telling us everything, which was nice.
Yeah, it's clear that there's some more depth to the backstory for both of these women. And they both have a lot of skin in the game as far as what's been going on in the plot. I thought it was hilarious that in the last couple of episodes, Mariko was like, "We're to Blackthorn, we're not going to have any more conversation except through other people's lips," and like trying to hold him at arm's length. But then Toranaga's like, "Yeah, you're going to take him to the brothel, and then you're going to join him and be translator there."
Yeah.
It was so funny.
It's one of those things where Toranaga is wise, and at some points you're like, to a fault, or maybe he's being unwise, but it feels like he's really the master here playing chess as if he doesn't know what's happening. That scene of Blackthorn sitting in front of Toranaga, trying to ask him for a ship and to leave again, and Mariko trying to argue and bicker, the whole thing was fun. It was a little bit, honestly, it was a little romantic while being conflict, a little bit of conflict there, but
yeah. And then Toranaga, I think he knows what's going on. He's not dumb. And his fits continue to impress. I was really watching that and I was like, damn, dude, your outfits just keep getting better with your little hats.
if Prada released the Toranaga collection, I'd buy.
I'd buy. Yeah. I'd buy. I know a lot of people would buy. So this one basically picks up after the gigantic landslide that takes out like thousands of people are dead. And because Blackthorn saved Toranaga again, Toranaga bestows on Blackthorn a bunch of honors, makes him a general in his army, and like gives him an entire fief. None of which Toranaga wants, because Toranaga just wants to leave. But I think, none of which Blackthorn wants, but it doesn't perplex Toranaga because Toranaga's scheming and he wants Blackthorn around.
And I asked the one question. I'm going to jump ahead. Why not? I'm going to ask the one question that's on my mind. Is Toranaga the bad guy?
Honestly, dude, I don't know. I'm sitting here like I'm watching the episode, right? And I'm just like, I want to root for Blackthorn and I want to root for like Mariko, but I don't have enough understanding of kind of the, I don't know, the geopolitics of all these different houses and families to really know who's in the right. And it just seems like they haven't really told us yet why, like Lady Ochiba hates Toranaga so much and why the people are so hell-bent on getting rid of Toranaga. And it didn't dawn on me until you just asked that question of like, maybe he's the bad guy.
Yeah, honestly, watching and knowing that George Lucas loves Kurosawa and Japanese storytelling as well as Western. I sat there and I was like, wait, is this Chancellor Palpatine? Is
Oh,
this the good guy who's so good about keeping Blackthorn? And there's always these motives that seem positive and benevolent. But then he was pretty quick to say Crimson Skies, let's go. He had to throw it off the first time. And then the second time, he's like, I guess we got to storm Osaka and destroy the entire capital.
yeah, because it's funny that it's just like how in Dune, where Paul spends the first 3/4 of the movie just being like, I can't go to the South. I can't take on the power of all these things. And then as soon as he goes south, he's like, okay, I'll drink the poison.
Yep.
I'll become everything you think I am. And yeah, I guess you're right that Toranaga is very much, he's playing this outward role of like, I don't know, find something that's less death. I don't know, find something where like a little bit more peaceful. And then at the end, he's like, the other guys they're just so good at what they're doing. I guess we're just going to have to go in there and kill them all.
Yeah, it really begs the question of if you're willing to change your position that quickly, was it that strong to begin with, or was it just a cover?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to like. I almost want to like go back and watch episodes now and be like, is Toranaga actually secretly scheming the entire time? And like, is he actually the secret baddie?
Yeah, knowing the Blackthorn has something to offer that would be different, or at least something that his rivals would not anticipate as far as tactics or whatever. I mean, who would think to bring the ship cannons on the ground and just start blasting people? That's something only Blackthorn could offer. It is interesting, like you're saying, Lady Ochiba doesn't reveal what it is he was scheming and planning when he was around her father, which is,
Yeah,
or sorry, husband. No, no, it was her father, right?
yeah, it was her dad. Yeah,
Okay. So there's continually this like reference, and she's keeping all the other regions inside the castle as prisoners. We see Lord Sugiyama finally make his protest, leave, and get murdered by Ashido. I think it's interesting that we're like still hanging on and not getting the full story, like everybody else seems to in the castle. She's not telling them about the plot. She just says there is a plot.
yeah. And I thought there was a really good scene in the middle of this with the Kabuki theater that they were at
Oh yeah,
that was telling the story of like how the Taiko like had a son, and so we're getting the story in flashbacks from Ochiba's point of view, where she's like, oh, the Taiko's wife can't bear a son, so we need a consort that will. And then she's like drugged up and laid there while the Taiko impregnates her.
yeah,
And then to have that same story played out in the Kabuki theater, I thought was really like really well executed. I thought that was really good like filmmaking.
yeah. Really good filmmaking. At a certain point, like probably a minute in, I wondered, I'm like, wait, what are we watching here? Why are we watching it? But it was so much better than just straight flashbacks as a way of, like you're saying, not just a storytelling device, or it could have been easier, but it was better drawn out to then have the actor suggested to take Toranaga's place on the council. I was like, what a weird switch. But yeah, a good tie in there and a good building of the backstory for Achiba and why she thinks the Toranaga is so evil in that Mariko's father killed Achiba's father, Mariko's father, Toranaga are buddies, so there must be the infighting. And at least we get a little bit of why she hates him. But again, not enough to see why she wants to
Yeah,
just
and
all out war.
and it did nothing but make me like want to root for Lady Ochiba as well. That like
Yeah.
she's not like a Cersei Lannister.
No.
That she's a woman who's been scorned and used by Empire, and she now sees an opportunity to take some vengeance for herself. And I'm like, yeah, girl, you go get it. And so I'm really not sure who's like, I know who the protagonists are, but I don't know. I don't think this story is about good and evil. I just think this is a story.
And it's doing a good job. Doing a job of being a little gray. Because Toranaga talks to Mariko and tells her why her father married her off to Buntaro. That he knew Buntaro was not going to be some stand up man or husband or father or whatever, but more so that it would keep her safe in the aftermath of an assassination. But it still leaves it a little gray of like, Toranaga, did you know? Were you part of the assassination? You're telling her details, but you're not telling her your part in it. She
Yeah,
just
and
wants to
I'm
know.
like, how long have you been around her and you didn't care to enlighten her about this
Yeah.
information? Like come on, dude. Like, you know that she's hurting and you just have the information that could like soothe her or help her be better, but you're just not giving it to her.
I work with Japanese licensors with my day
Hmm.
job. I've learned in general as a culture with the hierarchical structure, there's no giving details to lower down the totem pole people. And so part of it is you accept what I say just because, and you are not going to get any more details. So he doesn't give Mariko details until now,
Mm,
and he doesn't give Blackthorn details. Sometimes when watching a show, I'm like hitting my head against the wall, just being like, explain to him he cannot go home. That's the end of it. Take it out of his mind and just be like, enjoy your Japan life. But he doesn't, and he doesn't explain anything about his crew. Like, I assume they are dead, or his
yeah.
ship has either been scuttled or will be taken by Toranaga. He
Yeah.
just continually leaves it there and he's like, here's your fee. Stop arguing. Goodbye. Okay, explain. Do something. But they're not even dignifying the questioning because there's
Yeah.
such a hierarchical structure.
That's interesting. I would not thrive there. I would not thrive under, I'm not a yes man, so I couldn't do that. I would not be a very good loyal foot soldier.
It's the honor culture that I'm glad the West is mostly, well, the West. America has mostly moved out of, other than the South or some other pockets of certain political parties. But it's weird to think of like a whole culture still based in the honor culture of you just obey because you obey, and if they're higher up, and you do not ask questions. That creates for good storytelling, but bad life.
Yeah. I'd say we've got a version of it here. It just is typically about status and money and capital totem poles. But yeah, to have it more overt and not have it be subtext is like certainly it's culture shocking.
Yeah. I find it fun as well that Toranaga's son, Nagakato, as well as some of his other generals or people within his military, just have to sit there and watch Blackthorn get all these gifts.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like seeing the girl who's got a sugar daddy or the guy whose parents are buying him a new car. There's just like a weird feeling that has to create jealousy and animosity. And again, I wonder, is Toranaga just playing the pawns? And he's like, my son's going to get so pissed off. Either he'll kill Blackthorn or he'll do better than him and lead us to victory. One of the two has to happen, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point because at least from our perspective, it looks like Blackthorn's done things that merit some degree of honor,
Yeah.
but giving someone a fief who isn't from your culture seems like a bad idea. Like no one can I couldn't be the governor of a town in New York. Like I just couldn't do that. Like I don't know enough about what's going on in New York to do that very well. And it just seems I'm like, sure, that's an honor to give him this, but like, it can't be good down the line.
But what if you saved another town's mayor twice? Isn't that enough?
Isn't that enough?
If you
Maybe I'd
became
be,
the mayor, if you became the mayor of Buenos Aires because
yeah.
you saved the president of Argentina from a rock slide, you wouldn't be everyone's favorite mayor.
No, I wouldn't. I would say, no, thank you. I don't want to be the mayor, but yeah, send me to the brothel. I'll take that one.
That was an accepting gift, right? And the fact that
Yeah.
everybody knew about it was a better level for me of like, there's going to the brothel and like, yeah, okay, nice. Then there's going to the brothel and the whole town knows and they're watching you return from the brothel. An added layer
With the lady.
with the talent. Yeah.
Yeah. Blackthorn, he mentions that while he's in the tea house with I think Lady Kiku that he's like, oh, the
Yeah.
prostitutes in where I come from are less polished than this. And it certainly you can tell that how different cultures relate to sex will inflect like all cultures will have prostitution, but how what their relationship is with sex will indicate what the prostitution looks like and what the status is that goes along with that.
And I loved Mariko's translation when he says, no one back home is as polished. And she goes, he prefers his homeland. Like just a little dig for those who are watching and reading the subtitles, like, oh, that's nice. Okay. She still
Yeah,
looks a
no.
little pained.
The translation efforts from Mariko, that's a really good storytelling tool where we get to know what Blackthorn actually thinks, but then to have it filtered through Mariko so that it's palatable to people, or that she's making Blackthorn look a certain way to people. I think that's a very good storytelling tool for something that could be really clumsy and clunky throughout the entire series, but to make translation instead into a storytelling device.
Yeah, there's a moment where Kiku is honestly waxing poetic about the role of a woman and emotion and all these things. And she sits herself behind and to the right of Mariko, who is behind and to the right of Blackthorn. And so there's this really cool, just a beautiful piece of cinematography and a great setup and scene design of
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, all in a line. You're getting the story. And then, of course, Mariko's getting really emotional, and Blackthorn can feel it. So it's almost like his night with Kiku is proxy at that point of Kiku's like
Yeah.
saying, I will act in behalf of
Mm-hmm.
Mariko because she cannot right now.
Yeah. And that little hand grab when Mariko's leaving,
Yeah.
that was like there was a lot of tension that was palpable in that scene, but I just thought that was so really good. I've heard a lot about the Pride and Prejudice like hand flex or whatever from that guy. I don't know. I've never seen it.
Matthew
But
McFadden, yeah.
yeah, but like to see Blackthorn reach out and just graze Mariko's hand as she's walking out of there before he goes to have his night with Lady Kiku, I was like, damn it, that's so good. That makes me feel.
Yeah, my phone's listened to me talk about Shogun enough. It just pops up all kinds
Mhm.
of things on Instagram, including there's a whole lot of Shogun fan art and fan fiction. And you know what? The longer the series goes, as we get the little Blackthorn and Mariko, the more intense it gets. The more
Oh my
stories are being
gosh.
published. People were like, there were 8 last week, there are 40 this week. Anyways, people are
Holy cow.
fans. People are shipping it.
I mean, what a
Great.
great story.
It's a great story.
Like the story's not about light and dark and like good and bad. It is a very human story, but like I'm really when the first episode I was like, okay, so this is gonna be Blackthorn, cool, whatever. But the more it's going on, I'm like, he's a really like he's endearing. Like
Yeah.
I like him as a character, and Mariko certainly in the first couple episodes is behind the eightfold fence, but the more of her we see, the more compelling of a character she is. And like it isn't this kind of some stories are very plot driven where it's just the actions of whatever's going on is the thing driving the
Yeah.
momentum of the story. But this is very character driven where there are things going on in the plot, but it's the actions of the main characters that are the thing that are carrying the momentum of the story and keeping us there week to week.
Yeah, I feel like they could have gone so many different ways as a character driven story of let's be honest, this was made 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Blackthorn would have brought Japan free speech and breaking hierarchy and breaking out. Or reverse, Mariko would have taught Blackthorn how to be truly civilized. Where I feel like instead we have a blending of both characters meeting a little more in the middle. Like I know it was a directorial decision, or maybe it was just in the script and the screenwriter, but at the beginning, when Toranaga is giving Blackthorn the swords and the fief, and he's in front of everybody calling him out for his bravery, I think a few episodes ago, Blackthorn would have been saying something, speaking out of turn, looking around, where instead he stays quiet the entire time. Mariko doesn't have to translate too much. He just stays quiet, accepts the swords, and bows, and that's it. And I think that shows a little bit of character growth in a better way than clunky exposition or same goofy character stays the same till episode 8 and changes on 9. It's nice to see a progression every single episode where there's intention in the writing to say they're both changing and here's how they're changing together.
Yeah, no, you definitely can tell. He was a lot quieter this episode than he has been
Yeah.
in episodes past, and especially the way that he bows is much more formal. And I definitely noticed that in this episode, the way his hands are placed, the way he's bowing. He comes before Toranaga, he takes out his longer sword, puts it on the ground, and so he's a lot more formal, and he's observing some of the more ritualistic things that are going on in the Japanese culture. And I think some of his more European brazenness is certainly rubbing off on Mariko as she's less withheld in front of Toranaga and others.
Yeah.
And so it's not, culturally speaking, it is not this story. Because on the first couple episodes, it was like, oh my gosh, these barbarians, and both the Europeans and the Japanese were calling each other barbarians. And it was like, okay, well, that's not what this story is about. But the longer it goes on, it's like, no, this isn't about like, oh, freedom of speech or like, or feminism or whatever. This is just like, this is about a cultural exchange where we can learn something positive from each culture. And we can see how each culture is also barbaric in its way.
Yeah, really, it's treating us as the audience as adults, which is nice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very respectful.
It's very respectful, and I think it just lends it's a great on-screen showing of the respect that went into the entire preparation, the plot, the writing, the directing, the casting, the authenticity. Every single part of it just shows respect, which is something to appreciate.
No, it is. This is like Shogun is what you get when everything is hitting on all cylinders. Just like how Dune is what you get when everything in the movie making is just hitting on all cylinders. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, I'm gonna call out for you and anybody else watching. I already mentioned the podcast on Hulu, which is great. Episode by episode, they're interviewing people. It's doing what we would do if we were hired by Shōgun. And then they've just added a featurettes tab, special features for a streaming service, which we don't usually get.
Oh, wow.
So I watched the one last night about authenticity and movement. And they hired a whole bunch of historian coordinators to make sure they got the authentic movement styles of everybody on set. So you see the women in the kimonos shuffling in a certain way. There was an authenticity coordinator for that. The tools used for cooking or eating or whatever else, authenticity down to that time period. And so it's great to see all these, I'm a history nerd, it's great to see all these historians and people who have that knowledge brought in on the production to say, they wouldn't have done that. They would have done this. Here's how they would have bowed. Here's how they would have done hand gestures so you don't have 21st century hand gestures for Toranaga, one of the regions in this time period. So it's like 6 or 7 minutes long. Really fun to watch. And it's great to see how much preparation they did of men standing in parking lots with masks on, swinging samurai swords and t-shirts and shorts. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is still a show. This is still a television show. A lot of work went into really getting those little details right that you might not notice, but when put together, tell a whole story that feels like a different time period.
No, and they nailed it. I feel like those things just really come through really well. Like, especially the hand gestures, like the women, the way that they hold their hands when they're pouring the tea or taking, like, just going about the house, like, it's on display. It's really great movie making. It's just fantastic.
I'll say I'm excited to watch the last 3 episodes. I think it's last 3 episodes. Once I figure this out. I'm excited to watch the last 4 episodes. The next one comes out Tuesday the 2nd, so that'll be before this is published. So it is out now. Then we've got 3 more. So 4 episodes total to see what wraps up with Shōgun. And I'm excited, honestly, that the show is doing so well and so many people are watching it because it proves once again that it doesn't have to be like that terrible Disney shareholder who's talking about wokeness in the Marvels and Black Panther. It just proves that people want to see good stories and they want to see something different. They want to learn. They want to watch something that feels authentic and has heart in it. So yeah, don't make something cheap, chintzy, and just trying to cash in. Make something from the heart that's really well done, and anybody will recognize that and watch it.
Yeah, agreed.
We will wrap up there. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode from our Flow series, Kevin to Say. And until then, watch good movies and TV, including